Been back and forth with Tyrann Mathieu and Lattimore and all those guys, and Big Dom.
This was one of the most physical games I have ever seen.
Christian Boyd, number 97, comes in from behind. Again, it looks horrible. It was a terrible hit. Just want to be.
And people were talking trash the whole night.
Top what? Top what? Top what?
Take us to the final drive here. Talk about the interception.
We knew he was going to give us one all game.
Derek Carr and the New Orleans Saints fell to the Philadelphia Eagles, but what does this mean? The pregame show was all about how the Philadelphia Eagles can stop the hot offense of the New Orleans Saints. You knew when you saw all this foreshadowing in the preview show that something was going to happen, something was going to stop, and what we saw was absolutely shocking. Not only did the New Orleans Saints offense come to a halt, but no team scored a touchdown in the first half. It was 0-3 by the top of the third quarter. Things were going so well in New Orleans while that offense was piping hot for the Saints. Actually, the crime rate and the rate had gone down significantly to a historic low. Literally, Derek Carr and Clint Kubiak were saving lives. We're going to break down this game, but the Eagles found a way to get the dub at the end of it, and Eagles fans were actually harassing Drew Brees after the game.
Drew Brees, go Birds! Oh, really?
Honestly, that's a pretty good comeback by Drew Brees. Also, in the majority of this game, the Saints defense was absolutely clamping down on the Eagles. They forced multiple turnovers. You had the honey badger, Tyrann Mathieu, get an interception in the end zone. Jalen Hurts struggled throughout this game. He was able to move the football down the field, but he would make critical mistakes like coughing up a fumble, allowing a turnover. But I think the guy who made the biggest mistakes for the Philadelphia Eagles, and it had Eagles fans like this absolutely losing their mind throughout the game, was Nick Sirianni, the head coach who's always had an attitude and has always made boneheaded decisions. And honestly, he's gone into this year being on the hot seat, given the fact that the Philadelphia Eagles, give them credit, they have an amazing roster built by the general manager, Howie Roseman, but it seems like Nick Sirianni keeps making mistakes. He kept going for it on fourth down, and that is when these guys absolutely lost it. When you saw Nick Sirianni go for it on fourth down 3 times, you had that Eagles fan pointing out 3 times, and they failed every single time. I honestly thought that the story for this game was going to be Nick Sirianni's boneheaded decisions, and he got so lucky that they squeezed out a victory at the end. We know how Philly fans are. We know how these Eagles fans are. I bet you some of these guys want to fire Nick Sirianni, even though they got the dub. The biggest issue is the Saints offensive line that had been so dominant. You saw them run the football down the Cowboys' throat. Well, that was non-existent in this game. The Saints offensive line was so unorganized that they could not even get the colors right on the offensive lineman numbers. Why is his colors yellow instead of gold like the rest of the team? But in all seriousness, we're going to talk about this at the end of the video. Erik McCoy, team captain and the best offensive lineman on the New Orleans Saints, got injured during the first drive in the first quarter, and that really set the team back. As soon as you saw Erik McCoy have to be removed from the game and Lucas Patrick, the backup center, come in, who's actually the starting guard he just lit over, you saw the Saints suddenly unable to run the football like they did against the Carolina Panthers, like they did against the Dallas Cowboys, and you knew that this game was going to be ugly after that. Derek Carr tried to compliment the offensive line after the game, said they did great, but you saw boneheaded mistakes like this. Literally 2 guards running into each other and hugging each other during this game. You knew the pass protection was not going to be great, especially against studs on that Eagles defensive line like Jalen Carter. I feel like that was the story of the game. Jalen Carter, who had been quiet the first 2 weeks, suddenly was a wrecking ball. The former Georgia Bulldog kept on penetrating the Saints offensive line, whether it was them trying to run the ball or that play action. And that's really how the Saints offense has excelled in these first 2 weeks. I was wondering in this game, how is Clint Kubiak going to adjust to this? How is he going to step up now that he's facing some adversity, which is the fact that you don't have your starting center? They didn't have the starting center. You can no longer just get 5 yards to carry with Alvin Kamara running the football, and you can no longer do that play action. Nobody's really going to bite on that when you're not effective running the football, and you're not going to give Derek Carr time to hit those long bombers to Rashid Shaheed. That was not happening in this game. Keep in mind, Taysom Hill was also injured for this game. I originally thought, okay, maybe that wouldn't be too big of a deal, but you actually saw how important Taysom Hill is in this game. The guy lines up at fullback, and that really keeps defenses honest. Is he going to just be a fullback and lead block? Is he going to go out and pass? Is he going to run the football? They didn't have any of that disguise and trickery in this offensive game plan. Now, on one level, you can just sit here and say, oh, well, too bad the Saints center got injured. They didn't have Taysom Hill, and Jalen Carter's just way too good. There's nothing they could do about it. But no, this was a moment when this team could have shown, especially on the offensive side of the football, because in my opinion, the offense lost them the game. I think in everyone's opinion, the offense lost them the game, besides the ending drive. We'll get into that in a little bit. But this was a moment when they could have really shown how resilient this team is, how they can deal with this kind of adversity. And I thought we could really see Clint Kubiak step up as an offensive coordinator. And I really feel like this guy did not adjust. You lost your center. You could no longer run the football effectively. And instead of trying to figure something else out, try to get something else going, he just kept running the football in that wide zone to Alvin Kamara, right up the middle to Alvin Kamara. And it was going for no yards time and time again. Now, Derek Carr and the passing game was not effective. He did have pressure in his face, and that caused him to make some inaccurate throws. But there was one thing that was working out, and that was Derek Carr to Chris Olave. That was shredding. That was working out for a good portion of this game, and I felt like Clint Kubiak went away with that. Instead, he had Alvin Kamara run the football roughly 26 times exactly for 3.3 yards a carry. You kept running it even though you're getting nothing going, and the one thing that was effective, the Saints sort of went away from it, which was the Chris Olave action. And literally, McDonald's was giving out a free large fries after every Saints touchdown. The Saints got a touchdown with Chris Olave. So not only would the Saints have won this game if they would have gotten the ball more to Chris Olave, but all of us would have gotten more French fries. We mentioned some of the great turnovers that the Saints made early in this game. They were giving up yards that whole time, though. Let's be clear about that. And the offense obviously could not capitalize on the opportunities. 3 and out. They could not get that deep ball to Rashid Shaheed that had been working all year long. But then we saw this moment in the game, and I feel like this is when everything changed. This is when the Eagles went absolutely off against the New Orleans Saints. And that was this crazy helmet-to-helmet, maybe helmet-to-helmet hit on Devontae Smith. You saw the lineman come in, crack Devontae Smith. The helmet popped off. When you look a little bit closer at the replay, he does lead with his shoulder, and it seems like the helmet of the other guy who was already on Devontae Smith kind of collides into him. But you had people saying that the Saints were playing dirty. This guy should be suspended. This guy should be expelled from the NFL. And it was the defensive lineman Christian Boyd who did make a post on Instagram about it, saying he would never deliberately try to give somebody a serious injury, just tried to make a play on the ball, and said, get well 6, get well number 6, Devontae Smith. You saw him get injured. It was absolutely ugly. And I understand people saying this is dirty. The guy already had 2 people wrapped on him, but this was a very physical matchup from the Eagles side as well. They were making some big hits on Saints players throughout the game. And it's an unfortunate situation, and I hope Devontae Smith gets healthy because the Eagles had their share of excuses as well. They had injuries to the offensive line during this game, and they were already without A.J. Brown, their number 1 wide receiver, going into this game. But after this brutal moment when the Saints did get too physical with Devontae Smith, even though I don't think he deliberately tried to do it, I think he made a boneheaded mistake. You saw Saquon Barkley run up the throats of the New Orleans Saints for a touchdown, getting the first touchdown in this game, and that big dirty hit to Devontae Smith gave the Eagles the spark to get their offense going against the New Orleans Saints. It was karma. It bit them in the ass. Now, at the end of the game with 4 minutes and 38 seconds to go, you saw the Saints offense finally step up, finally put together a solid drive, and that was great to see. Derek Carr and the offense moved down the field, and they were able to get their first touchdown of the day, and it was a good one to Chris Olave, who was being covered by the safety, CJ Gardner Johnson. We're going to get into this guy in a little bit. But the Saints were able to capitalize off of good field position, marching down the field from the 50-yard line after the Eagles missed a field goal. They tried for the 2-point conversion afterwards. I did not like the throw by Derek Carr. I think it was just a little bit short, intended for Jamal Williams. But I also did not like the play call too. You need this 2-point conversion, and you're going to go to Jamal Williams in the air. That's not really his forte for this critical play. I don't like that call by Kubiak either. But look, the Saints finally leaned into their passing game instead of running into a wall, and they had success. And I think Clint Kubiak should have done this earlier. I think he should have put the game in Derek Carr's hands rather than trying to stick to that same old game plan since Eric McCoy, your best offensive lineman, was out. But there was 2 minutes to go, and it seemed like the offense finally did their job. The Saints had a lead against the Philadelphia Eagles here, and all the defense needed to do was to make a stop with less than 2 minutes to go, and they've been dominant all game. But I think a couple of things went wrong. First of all, the defense had to be on the field for the majority of the game, so they were kind of gassed, I think, by the end of it. Plus, Demario Davis had a groin injury. Arguably the best defensive player on the Saints was not available on the final drive, the most important drive of the game. We'll give an update on that in a little bit. And also on this final play where Dallas Goedert went down the field for 70 yards, absolutely insane, you saw Saints players run into each other on this drag route. This allowed the slow tight end Dallas Goedert to absolutely smoke the Saints defense and get in great field position to get the touchdown to finally win the game. And this was devastating that the Saints defense was not able to hold up in this critical moment, but at the same time, there was still a shot to win the game down 3 points against the Eagles at home. Derek Carr and the Saints offense took over with 1 minute to go and 1 timeout. And they only got 2 plays into this drive. They had 1 good completion, but the pressure just kept getting into Derek Carr. You could see on this final play where he throws the game-ending interception, you look at all these defensive linemen, these dogs coming after him like Jalen Carter right in his face. He took a big shot on this final play. You saw him grabbing himself afterwards, but he admitted after the game that maybe he should not have taken this shot. He went for that deep bomb to Rashid Shaheed. Reed Blankenship, the safety, made a great play, was able to jump in front of it, scoop up that interception. He was hoping Rashid Shaheed would maybe come back a little bit for that long bomb, but that had not been connecting the entire day, and you only needed a field goal to tie this game and send it into overtime. And I feel like overtime is what the Saints needed. They had home field advantage. So I think Carr got a little too desperate there. It was just second down with 55 seconds left to go, a timeout. It was a long game still. You still had time. But with that pressure in his face, probably didn't think he could throw it away without getting an intentional grounding. And obviously, if he was sacked, they would have had to use their final timeout. And the Eagles were absolutely celebrating and talking trash after they won this game. You saw Jalen Carter getting into it with the honey badger, yelling at fans. He had to be held back by his head coach. But this just shows how passionate and chippy this game was the entire time. And the Eagles are trying to act like they dominated. They barely squeezed by this victory. You had CJ Gardner Johnson, a former Lion and a former New Orleans Saint, talk mad trash on the Saints after the game.
The top offense in the league coming into today.
Man, we're in top, top what? Top what? Top what? Top what? Top what? We keep receipts.
So you see the final drive, Derek Carr had the interception.
We knew he was going to give us one all game. Everybody wanted to bet on, they thought they had us on a little 7 route, the lobby, okay, cool. But they didn't go over our head all day.
They got rid of me, I ain't get rid of them. It's still in me. It's still tatted on me.
Obviously, this guy has some bad blood because he was part of the team, but he made a comment that did not get recorded, but the reporter, Bridget Condon, who recorded this interview, caught it from the locker room, and it was about the Saints offense and Derek Carr. So he was heard by Bridget saying that they ain't no contenders. They're pretenders. They have Derek Carr. Remember that. So hopefully Derek Carr and the Saints use these words as motivation. CJ Gardner Johnson directly calling out the offense and the quarterback, basically saying it was a fluke these past 2 weeks. They are pretenders. But obviously this guy is going to talk mad trash and say whatever. He's already a loudmouth, and it's his former team. He has some bad blood. Plus, he was the one who gave up the touchdown against Chris Olave that we mentioned earlier. And look, the Saints do need to figure out what they're going to do when they cannot run the football, when they're dealing with injuries with their best offensive lineman, the center, who does make a lot of checks and protections, Eric McCoy. And they also need to figure out what they're going to do defensively on that final drive without Demario Davis, who is the captain, the linebacker, the guy with the green dot on that defense. They got to figure out what they're going to do without that leader as well. He's part of the glue that holds that defense together, and him not being on that final drive probably caused some major mistakes. But all in all, this Eagles team was absolutely scared they were going to lose the entire game. I think the offense did not live up to expectations, obviously. The defense played well most of the game, especially by creating turnovers. And I think the Saints should be proud of this matchup. The Eagles are obviously a good team. They were in the Super Bowl a few years ago, and this looks like it's going to be a postseason preview. Pro Football Talk mentioned the comments that CJ Gardner Johnson said about Derek Carr and says that it has us wishing for a postseason rematch. And when you look at the 49ers going downhill, when you look at the Lions not looking like the hot team they were last year, they've been struggling. I really do believe that this could be a preview for the NFC Championship. So give the Eagles credit, but I think DC4 is not going to forget those comments. My name is Wi-Fi Willie. Peace out, and I hope you have a good one.